So I watched this debate, James Fodor versus Johanan Raatz. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Johanan, James Fodor, if you remember, he was in a debate. He's the big brain atheist guy who took on our big brain, our very own inspiring philosophy, and lived to tell the tale, lived to fight another day. But apparently he has done us the profound service of digging up a guy I didn't even know existed, an even bigger brain than inspiring philosophy. I swear to God. This brain is so big. This is like basically the biggest gun I've ever found in our squad. This guy is such a big brain. This is the guy that inspiring philosophy goes to be inspired to do philosophy, quite literally. Apparently, and I didn't know this until last week, I'd never heard of this guy before, but apparently this is the guy who was the original inspiration for the digital physics argument for inspiring philosophy. He at least got some of it from Johanan Raatz. I never heard of Johanan until last week. Now, in this conversation with Jay, more of a conversation than a debate, he presents a version of this argument. I guess he's presenting it as an argument for God, but I'm going to scale it back and make it an argument for idealism. If it's an argument for God, it's a bit of a stretch. But as an argument for idealism, it's pretty much a slam dunk, and, you know, I'm pretty sure it's right on the doorstep of established fact. Or at least it's eminently plausible, eminently defensible propositions. So let's unpack. The first thing I will say about James Fodor, if you do not know him, really bright guy. He actually has a decent amount to a lot of amount of integrity. If you do not believe that, you can compare his treatment of Johanan. I'm about to critique him mildly, so before I critique him mildly, let me say in his defense, he has a lot of integrity. If you are comparing him to Matt Dillahunty, freaking night and day. Unbelievable. I watched, after I watched this video with James and Johanan, I started poking around, went to Johanan's channel, started watching. He's actually been on YouTube a lot. He just disappeared for a few years. He's pretty well known. I just never heard of him before. But he has presented versions of his postulate to Matt Dillahunty on the Atheist Experience on at least 3 separate occasions. Now, the one thing about Johanan, which you have to know if you're going to watch this video and watch any of his videos, he's a physicist, okay? The beauty of inspiring philosophy, which means he talks like a physicist, and oftentimes if you're not familiar with the physics, and I'm a layperson in physics, but I've spent a lot of the last year, you know, watching videos, reading books by Carlo Rovelli, basically, you know, studying up on physics. I'm still a lay person, but I have a good enough grasp to understand really clearly that this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. As soon as he opens his mouth, that's obvious, right? The problem is he talks like a physicist. What the beauty of inspiring philosophy is what he is able to do is he's able to take really complex ideas from physics that he's even borrowed from Johanan, and he's able to package it up and present it in a video format that's relatively easy to understand. You watch an inspiring philosophy video on physics, you know, you watch it once or twice, you might have to watch it twice through, but you'll get the general concept. It's not that hard to understand, right? It's translatable. He's good at translating things down to a level that a layperson can understand. Johanan has no such skill. Johanan is not that good at that. He talks like a physicist, and if you're not familiar with the physics, it's not all that easy. It's not all that easy to grok what he's saying. But I will unpack it in this video because I speak dumb guy. Unfortunately, I speak dumb guy, and I speak it really easily. I'm pretty good at it, as a matter of fact. Skill, if you listen to my wife, it's a skill I've mastered because I'm, in fact, a dumb guy. But, okay, so now, Matt Dillahunty. Okay, heinous. I watched on 3 separate occasions. Johanan presented versions of his argument to Matt Dillahunty in the Atheist Experience. It was basically criminal to watch. It was painful. It was so dishonest and despicable how Matt Dillahunty treated him. Now, Matt Dillahunty's not a dumb guy, okay? He's not dumb. And when Johanan opens his mouth, if you're smart enough or you have some background in physics, it's really obvious that he knows what he's talking about. Really obvious, right? He talks a little bit too intelligently, but there's no way that you could actually think, well, this guy's just dumb. Matt Dillahunty played him as if he was saying stuff that was incoherent, unintelligible. Matt Dillahunty's not dumb, right? So the second this guy started presenting stuff on the Atheist Experience, Matt Dillahunty should have yielded and should have easily recognized this guy knows what he's talking about, and I should give him the floor and let him present his argument. And he didn't. 3 times he shut him down. 3 times he shut him down, really inappropriately. Like, they strawmanned him, they misrepresented what he's saying. And the first one I watched with, oh God, what was that awful girl who used to be on the show? She starts saying, you know, she starts talking about peer-reviewed stuff, and he's like, well, I can present peer-reviewed stuff. And she goes, oh, no, thank you. I mean, they handled him so badly. It was literally like evil. It was so poorly done. Now, why is it so upsetting? Because the original premise of Atheist Experience, I understand that the actual premise is wrecked the theist, right? Everybody understands that. Yeah, ha, 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 theists are so dumb. I understand that's the actual premise, right? I get it. But the stated premise, okay, is call us up, you know, we're open-minded, you present a new argument for God, we want to hear it, we want to listen. Okay, here's a guy calling up with new information that Matt Dillahunty didn't know. It's clear when this guy was opening his mouth, Matt Dillahunty didn't understand what he was saying from a hole in the wall. Really obviously. But Matt Dillahunty's not dumb, and he knows when someone is speaking cogent stuff that he just doesn't have the background to understand. I can do that, Matt Dillahunty can do that, any intelligent person can do that. So Matt Dillahunty owed it to the audience and owed it to integrity itself to slow down his freaking roll and give the guy the opportunity to present his argument clearly and coherently and help him unpack it. That's not too much to ask. That's called integrity. I knew Matt Dillahunty could be bad. I never knew he could be actually that bad. What he did to Rohan on 3 separate occasions was literally criminal. Literally criminal. Literally, pretending like the other guy starts going, oh, it's so boring. Like pretending it's boring. New information the guy didn't know from a hole in the wall either. They start pretending he's saying things that are outlandish when it's standard physics. Pathetic. It was honestly pathetic. I knew Matt Dillahunty could be bad. I never thought he could ever actually sink that low. It was pathetic. Now, James doesn't do that. What James does, I'm going to critique him mildly. And James, if you are listening, you have some integrity, bordering on a lot of integrity. I'm going to hold you because you are capable of it to a standard of absolute integrity. As I've said in my videos in the past, absolute integrity is not too high of a standard. We have the answers from Reason Crew. They hit that high standard every single time they make a video. They hit that standard every single time. It's not too high of a standard. What it entails is you do what a person who actually cares about the truth is, you know, required to do in a situation where someone is unpacking a high-level, complicated argument that's not all that easy to follow. Your first responsibility is to the truth and serving the truth. So what James does in the first hour is really the meat of what they talk about. So I'm going to give my little mild critique of James. James, a mild critique. You know, simmer down. It's a mild critique. Your first responsibility. So in the first hour, James dings him on semantics. He starts talking about entangled information. Go, well, what do we really mean by the word information? that's my James imitation. To take it or leave it. It's terrible, Craig. I understand that. You know, they can't all be Stephanie imitations, but Stephanie imitation, as you're well aware of, if you listen to my channel, is easily one of the best imitations on YouTube. You're talking about your imitation of me, Craig? Yes, that one. It's uncanny. Uncanny how lifelike that impression actually is. Oftentimes, when a lot of people say, they go, Stephanie, where's Stephanie? We're on Craig's channel. They think it's literally me. See? Uncanny. So lifelike. Verisimilitude is the word that I've used in the past. It is so uncanny that people don't know how I do it, and they ask me often, was Stephanie on the stream with you? But my James imitation, unfortunately, is terrible. But this is what James said. So 2 separate times he argues semantics. And then the second time, there's a concept, space-time is not real. It's like, well, what do you mean it's not real? I mean, we're in space-time, so it's therefore real in some ways. So why am I going to ding him on that? This is a high-level, philosophical, complex argument. You can't argue semantics with this. Cannot. Why? So, are we all clear on what I'm saying? The first responsibility of James as an honest interlocutor, which he in fact is, that's why I'm holding him to a standard of absolute integrity. We don't play teams here. If you're an atheist here and you're listening to my videos, I don't care. Your job is not to debunk, dismiss, discredit anything. If someone is offering up a new argument with new information that has merit, your first responsibility is to the truth and to help that person unpack that argument and present it clearly and coherently. Matt Dillahunty doesn't think that's his responsibility. Let me clue you in right now, Matt. That's your responsibility. That's your responsibility to the audience and to the truth. And if you can't do that, get off the air, grow up, or go home. Because that is your responsibility. And that's not too much to ask, especially when it's your freaking show. Now, James misses that high mark a little because he argues semantics. Why you can't argue semantics? Really infuriating. You know, really infuriating. I might do videos where I take him to task on that, I doubt it, but I might. Ticked off. Ticked off, Craig. It was infuriating to watch. This is a really solid argument, and Matt Dillahunty easily has enough intelligence to help him unpack it, and he wouldn't do it. He misrepresented, strawmanned him, made him try to look dumb and foolish, all of which was basically bastardizing the truth. Right in front of your face. Right in front of everybody's face, and nobody called him out on it. All these theists are so dumb. Yeah, right. This guy's dumb. Pfft, give me a break. Anyways, so why James can't... all right, fine, simmer down, Greg. Fine. No, I'm calm. Deep breaths, Greg. All right, fine, deep breaths. Why James cannot argue semantics is that what we're actually talking about, these are new phenomena that we're trying to articulate clearly, and we don't quite have the language to express them as what they're actually doing. So when you use information, yeah, he may be technically right, that might not be the right word. And then when we say space-time is not real, that might not be the most accurate description of the phenomena. But to argue semantics at this stage just kind of creates confusion rather than helps unpack. See, James didn't clearly understand the argument all that well from what I gathered in the first hour either. He understood it a lot better than Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty didn't understand from a hole in the wall. The guy might as well have been talking Chinese. Matt Dillahunty had no clue what he was talking about. Matt Dillahunty doesn't do any freaking homework. James does a lot of homework. Decent amount, probably more than any atheist. But I'm not sure if he clearly understood the argument. So his first responsibility is to help him unpack it, and semantics gets in the way of that. Technically, James was right, sort of, but you can't talk semantics when you're bringing up, new information. So let's get to the argument itself. I'm trying to make this quick. I make my videos too long. I apologize. Once I start yapping, I just start to have fun. All right, so what is the argument itself? Like I said, I'm going to present it. I'm going to scale it back. It's too ambitious as an argument for God, but as an argument for idealism, case closed, slam dunk, game over. The truth? I mean, I think it's true. What do you want me to say? It's true. It's true, Greg. It's true. Okay, so space-time is not fundamental. There's something premise one, space-time is not fundamental. There's something far more fundamental from which space-time emerges from. Premise two, that far more fundamental entity, according to Johanan Raatz, he is calling entangled information. Premise three, entangled information, according to Johanan Ratz's argument, is a form of consciousness and, or if you prefer, proto-consciousness. Put it all together, what do you have? Space-time emerges from consciousness itself as the ontological primitive. Space-time itself emerges from a form of entangled information or proto-consciousness, consciousness itself. Now, why is this such a slam dunk? Pretty sure there's a lot of different versions of arguments like this. First of all, the first premise, let's just deal with that first. Space-time is not fundamental. There's something far more fundamental from which space-time has emerged from. It's not that complicated of a concept. It's not quite consensus physics, but it certainly ain't fringe physics. It's mainstream physics, okay? He cites a couple of physicists when his conversation with James. The person I'm going to refer you to has a couple of lectures called Space-Time is Doomed. His name is Nima Arkani Hamed. He's possibly one of the 5 best physicists alive today. Now, I've watched a few of his videos on this topic. They're not that hard to understand for the layperson. It'll take you 1 or 2 listens, but he's arguing a similar point, and it's frontiers of physics, but it's not fringe. It's basically right on the doorstep of mainstream physics. Not consensus. I won't go so far as to say that it's, consensus physics, but it's certainly mainstream. It's not a fringe position by any stretch of the imagination. Another person who's on a similar page, if you want to get a sense of this, how much of different variations of this argument are floating around on YouTube, you can look up Leonard Susskind, look up the holographic principle. There's a pithy little phrase that they use, that the physicists are using, called space-time is doomed. That's why you can't argue semantics. Why they've jumped on that pithy little phrase, space-time is doomed. I'm not sure. I think they just like the sound of it because that's what Nima Arkani Hamed labels his lecture, Space-Time is Doomed. Donald Hoffman has a version of this argument. He repeats the phrase space-time is doomed. If you go back 3 or 4 videos, I posted a thing from Donald Hoffman quoting Nima saying space-time is doomed. Now, what do they mean by this? They mean that there is something far, space-time itself is an approximation, okay? Nima Arkani Hamed goes through a series of thought experiments that, as far as I'm concerned, are proofs. I'm not sure if he's quite saying that they're proofs, but they operate as proofs as far as I'm concerned, for the premise that space-time is doomed. What does he mean? Space-time itself is an approximation. There is something far more fundamental from which space-time is emerges. That's the first premise of Johanan's argument, and I'll give you a rock-solid justification for it. If you listen to Nima's lecture, again, you could do this yourself. Look up Space-Time is Doomed, Nima Arkani Hamed. There's 3 or 4 different lectures on it. Not that hard to understand. Any of you can do this. I'm going to give you basically translate his argument for, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a proof. So what he says is, how we know it's approximation. Keep in mind, when physicists say the math is off, they mean, by a millisecond. One of the things, if you listen to my videos that I've been saying a lot, is that the mathematics of quantum mechanics and the mathematics of physics is so precise that it is ruling out possible interpretive frameworks. Why? Because not all of them fit the data points. The math is so precise, there aren't 50 different interpretations of quantum mechanics, there's roughly 10. And of those 10, roughly 5 or 6 are considered mainstream. Why? Because the math is so precise, there isn't a whole bunch of different interpretive frameworks that can account for the data points. There's only a few. And what he points out is that he does this thought experiment to show you that space-time is an approximation. And the thought experiment goes something like this. Keep in mind, I'm not a physicist. I'm not making this argument. I am translating the argument of one of the best physicists alive today. That's not an argument from authority. It is an appeal to authority. Guys, an authority on physics, you should listen. Argument from authority, Craig. Sounds like the no true horseman fallacy. All right, so what is this thought experiment? In essence, what he says, there is such a thing as the smallest possible measurement you can make, the Planck scale, something like 10 to the negative 30. Now, if space-time are accurate, theoretically, the small, teeny tiny little measurements only require vast outpourings of energy, right? So if we were trying to make the smallest, teeniest measurement ever made, I think at 10 to the negative 30, I'm almost positive that's the number, but I'm not, offhand I don't remember. Theoretically, the only thing stopping us from being able to take that measurement is the funding of the government. If the government gives us the money to build the coolest, to make the smallest measurement, we need to build the coolest, big Hadron Collider type thingy-bob to outpour all this energy. So if the government gives us unlimited funds, we could theoretically build this big, huge gizmo, this big, huge, cool gizmo, I believe that's the scientific term for it, this big, huge, cool gadget that makes all these explosions. We could build that cool thingy-bob, and we could take the smallest measurement ever made. But in practice, we can't do it. Why not? Because it requires an enormous outpouring of energy. And if you know Einstein's most famous equation, energy equals E equals mc squared, energy equals mass times speed of light squared. According to that, energy and matter are correlated, or energy and mass are correlated. When you have an enormous outpouring of energy, okay, once you reach a point, it's called technically critical mass. What happens is you would create a black hole. The space-time would collapse on itself and a black hole would be created. So what that tells him, the physicist, is that space-time is an approximation. That tells him that we need to fundamentally rethink space-time itself and that there is something far more fundamental from which space-time emerges. That's not satisfying. You can go watch the lecture. My translation is my translation. I'll make it better in videos to come. But that's his premise. And that's what, as far as I'm concerned, a proof for that idea. Now, getting to the next part. Entangled information. Like I said, these aren't quite consensus opinions in physics that Johanan is borrowing from, but this is certainly not fringe stuff. really good lectures. Leonard Susskind is doing a variation on. I'm not sure if Leonard Susskind is calling it the holographic principle, but there are a lot of people offering. Just look up the holographic principle, put it into YouTube. You'll get 50 lectures on the topic. Is space-time an illusion? It'll give you 50 lectures on the topic. All of this is well within the boundaries of mainstream physics. These are not fringe opinions. Leonard Susskind is not a fringe guy. He's a mainstream physicist. So this is not, Nima Arkani Hamed is not fringe at all. He's possibly one of the 5 best physicists alive today. So this stuff is real. He's not giving you a fringe opinion. The reason why I scaled back his argument is because as an argument for idealism, it's eminently plausible and makes complete sense to me. Matter of fact, it has enormous explanatory power. If you listen to my videos, I've told you philosophy has to be consistent in 3 key areas. 1, is it parsimonious? 2, does it have explanatory power? And 3, is it logically coherent? In explanatory power, this is actually somewhat off the charts. So let's get to space-time is an illusion. If you've listened to my videos, you also know, illusion, the idea that space-time, what we are living in, and, I borrowed some of these ideas from Donald Hoffman. He's very much on this page. He'll tell you consciousness is the ontological primitive, and that space-time is sort of like a virtual reality headset we are putting on, and we are not seeing the world as it actually is, but we are seeing approximate representations. Donald Hoffman says the reason why we're doing that is we are hardwired for fitness payoffs. We're not hardwired for accuracy. The point is, okay, the idea that space-time is an illusion or the real world in front of us is in some way illusory, again, this is not fringe opinion. This is not outlandish woo-woo idea stuff. Yes, you can source the original idea back to the Vedanta Hindus. If you listen to my videos, I've talked about this a lot. Okay, that's the original source. They called it Maya. The real world is illusion. But fast forward to the German idealists, and we basically come to the intuition and the understanding that in a certain sense, the real world as an illusion is more or less established fact. According to Donald Hoffman, you take it, what does Donald Hoffman say? Because I like the phrase. You are to take it seriously, but not literally. Now, this is where people have a lot of trouble understanding idealism, because everybody at our most basic level, our intuition is that the real world is actually there and has substance and it's objectively verifiable. We can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it. So at the macro level, that is in fact true. Properties hold their values. So there's a table in front of me. I could go bang, ow, kick it. It's really there. That was the famous argument against George Berkeley's idealism. I can kick the table and, ow, yeah, it's there, Greg, ow. Just hurt my leg, you dumb idealist. So it is there. At the macro level, properties hold their values. Nobody is disputing that, not even Bernardo Castro. Okay? There is sort of an objective reality, at the macro level. It has predictable behavior patterns, and we can talk about its properties and its values, and they hold. At the quantum level, this is not true. That's why quantum mechanics threw everybody. Now, if you've listened to my videos, I'm a big fan of relational quantum mechanics because I think that is the most parsimonious explanation of the data points. The other thing I've been saying in my videos is the reason that has been so slow to catch on is that it annihilates materialism and candidate option. Almost all scientists are embedded, including James, probably, actually very much so James, as trained to be physicalist materialists. That is their metaphysical a priori starting point assumption about the world. I happen to think it is entirely mistaken and quantum mechanics decimated in the 1920s. Now, relational quantum mechanics at the quantum level, properties do not hold their values. Subject and object are coupled. The observer is entangled with the observed. We basically know this for a fact. Real world is an illusion. I'll prove it to you right now. Okay, it's not all that complicated. It's not that hard to grok. Like I said, if you studied your Schopenhauer and your Kant, and let's be perfectly crystal clear, most of you didn't. If you studied your Schopenhauer, he would have taught you that we re-represent reality back to ourselves. And then if you combine it with Kant, he talks about the noumena phenomena distinction. There is the thing in itself, what the material substrate actually is, in fact, and that we re-represent it back to itself. The key is, and this is an established fact, this isn't up for debate, this is just the truth, We represent the quote-unquote material substrate, the real material world, back to ourselves in a form different than it actually occurs. Does everyone get that? That's fact. I can demonstrate that to you right now in this video, and you can know it for a fact. It's a fact. It's not up for debate. It's the truth. So, what do I mean? Right now, look to pick any object in the room. I've talked about this a lot in my videos. Some new people might be listening. I apologize if this is repetitive, but, gives you a clear understanding of it. Pick any object in the room in front of you. There's a chair, look at the chair. I'm looking at a couch right now. Okay, that couch presents itself to me in a form different than it actually is. There's the material substrate of the couch, intrinsic to the couch, the properties of it, and there's the way it represents to me. Okay, the way it represents to me is basically an illusion. It is presenting itself to me as solid matter, correct? And it's also presenting itself to me in this particular instance as white. So I am seeing it as solid matter and I'm giving it a color. I am giving it the color. The color is not solid matter. We know that for a fact. So just right there, we know that for a fact it is particles in motion. So we represent the real material world back to ourselves in a form different than it is. Illusion. See? We know this for a fact. Nobody argues with that. Everybody understands that the couch is not actually solid matter. It's particles in motion. We know that for a fact. Now, the color is not an intrinsic property of the couch. It is the light bouncing off of the couch, and I am giving it the color. It is interacting with my retina, and I am projecting a color onto it that is not, in fact, what the couch is. So we do not see the real material world as it actually occurs. Donald Hoffman is correct. He does proofs for this in some of his lectures. Anil Seth also talks about this. Anil Seth says we are basically hallucinating. We are making educated guesses at what we think we're going to see, and we are re-representing it back to ourselves in a form that is different than what is actually there. Now, Donald Hoffman says the reason we do that is we're actually training ourselves to see for fitness payoffs. Whether you believe that's the reason or not, that we do it is indisputable. So the real material world is to some degree an illusion. There's other examples of this that are really easy to understand. Right now, in front of your face, there are billions of particles flying around that are invisible, correct? How do you know they're invisible? You can't see them. You can't see them. Yeah, invisible. That's what it means. Okay, you can't see them. But they're there. We know there are billions of particles floating around in front of your face. Why is your brain doing that? It's filtering the information. Why? Because it would be not very useful to you to be able to see those particles. You bump into a lot of things. So we know for a fact that you are not interpreting reality as it actually is. It's like you are wearing, as Donald Hoffman describes, a virtual reality headset, okay? And the real material world is to be taken seriously, but not literally. Like I said, at the macro level, the easiest way to understand this is the macro level. Properties hold their values. I could kick the table. Ow, it's definitely there. At the quantum level, it is not. Prior to measurement, at the quantum level, the particle exists in what? A wave of probability. Why is this so trippy and mysterious? Because probability has not occurred yet. So it took that through everybody. It doesn't have to, as I've explained in my videos. If you understand, if you just have the proper metaphysical a priori assumptions, you have the proper philosophical, proper starting point, and you ask the question correctly, it actually makes complete coherent sense. As I've explained, when you ask a question about location, you say, where is Germany? The question makes no sense absent a reference point. Where is Germany? Where's Germany relative to what? You put it on a map. Germany is relative to France here and Italy there. Okay? So asking a question about location cannot be asked coherently absent a reference point. Ditto for velocity or the speed of an item. Say, how fast is the train going? How fast is the train going relative to what? So the train is going 100 miles per hour, traveling over the earth relative to the land. Now you ask a question about the particle. Where is the particle? Same thing. Prior to measurement, a particle has a 30% chance of being there, 30% chance of being there. It is in a wave of probability. It has not occurred yet. Now you plug in a reference point. The particle is there relative to an observer there or relative to a measuring device there. It's not all that complicated, trippy, and mysterious. What it does is it annihilates materialism, the candidate option. Materialism does not work. It does not fit the data points. It is not coherent. That's why relational quantum mechanics has been slow to catch on. That's my theory. Why? Because it annihilates materialism. And almost every one of our scientists for the last 150 years have been drilled into materialism. Physicalism / materialism has been drilled into their heads. That's why they struggle with the hard problem of consciousness. That's why they think the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is sensible when it's basically insane. Why? Because I'll make a video on this if people are interested. Can't really tell if people if your eyes glazing over or you're really taking it, Craig. I don't know. I'll make a video on it because pretty easy to understand. Where I'll go into the interpretations of quantum mechanics and why I think relational quantum mechanics is basically the right way. It's the most parsimonious. It's the one that explains the data points the best. Now, let me see if I'm running out of time. The many worlds is basically saying it is trying to account for that probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics by saying, the particle is going to appear there in this particular world, and then it appears over there in this world. So you keep materialism intact. A measurement has definite properties and definite outcomes and definite values in this world, and then there's another world where the probabilistic nature is accounted for. It's a way of keeping materialism in play in a way that's completely outlandish and ludicrous. Why there's not one single shred of empirical evidence for the idea that there are infinity of worlds breaking off from this one at any given time. It's a crazy idea. It's a crazy idea. But it's for another video. I'll leave it for another time. Now, the one thing I will say, Johanan is against substance dualism. He's an idealist, okay? He's an idealist according to the physics. I've been starting to watch his videos. I'm going to be dealing with him a lot in the months and years to come, just unpacking his videos. Apparently he's been around for years. He just disappeared. I'd never heard of him before. But he's got a lot of videos on this topic. I strongly recommend you go check out his channel. It's not that hard to understand. He's a little bit above our pay grade. He's obviously a physicist. I've been trained, probably graduate level physicist. He might even be working in physics. So when he speaks physicist. But, I translate it in a way that's pretty easy to understand. Entangled information is what he thinks the more fundamental property or entity from which space-time emerges from. He is calling entangled information. Like I said, there's a lot of different variations of these arguments out there on YouTube. I guess I'll wrap it up. Probably deal with this again in videos to come. As far as I'm concerned, it's a slam dunk. The reason why idealism, as I've said 100 times in my videos, the choice is binary between materialism and idealism. Idealism wins hands down. Materialism should have died in the 1920s in the quantum era. It's really pretty clear that it doesn't fit the data points. The reason why it has lingered on is because scientists have disassociated themselves from philosophy in this past 100 years. If they had studied their Kant and they had studied their Newman phenomena distinction, and they had studied their Schopenhauer, quantum mechanics wouldn't have thrown anybody all that much. Why? It's pretty consistent with certain types of philosophies. You have to work a little to fit it into a certain type of idealistic philosophy, but not all that hard. And Johanan is right on the doorstep of mainstream physics, reconciling a form of idealism to mainstream physics, basically. So I won't try to unpack any more of his basic line of argumentation in this particular video because I don't want to make 50-minute videos anymore. I'll try to keep these shorter. But the gist of it, I gave you, enough to get you started. I'm going to be bringing this up in videos to come. I really think it's game over. I'm almost positive the essential of what he's arguing is correct. There's a lot of different people who are on the same page. Bernardo Castro, Donald Hoffman. There's a lot of different variations of the argument. The holographic principle. The universe arises from encoded information. Are we in a hologram? Are we in a simulation? You can look up all variations of them. The physics are pointing to something that is basically, it's not quite established fact, but we're right on the doorstep of established fact. The the three-dimensional space-time that we experience is arising from encoded information. Leonard Susskind does a version of it, like I said. I think it's basically it. James, if you are listening to me, your homework assignment, you can give over, right? Yeah, I can do that. The guy's, he's a sharp guy, and he's an honest actor. And an honest actor wants to know the truth. So your homework assignment is look up Space-Time is Doomed, Nima Arkani Hamed. If If you want to just understand the first leg of it, that's the only thing I presented here. That's right on the doorstep of established fact. That there's a lot of different variations of entangled information theory, there's the other one that I forget what they call it. There's a lot of different variations of these arguments floating around on Twitter and YouTube, or on YouTube. You can look up, is space-time an illusion? But as I just pointed out with my little couch analogy, yes, to some degree, the real material world that we experience is an illusion. We are giving visual information that is not actually there. We are re-representing the world back to ourselves in a form different than it actually is. That's a fact. That was something that was pointed out a long time ago by Kant. He called it the phenomena, the noumena phenomena distinction. It's basically established fact. So at the very ground floor, at levels that's really easy to understand, yes, the real material world that you see in front of you is to some degree an illusion. To some degree. The only thing that we're going to be discussing in the future, and like I said, as I tried to point out, if you disagree with any of this, don't care, don't want to hear it. It's not important. This is not going to be settled by you and me on YouTube in a modern day debate. It's just not. It's going to be settled by the physicists, and it'll be settled pretty much one way. I'm almost positive it's going to go the way that Johanan thinks it's going to go, and I think it's going to go as a form of idealism, as established fact within the next 10 to 15 years. And it's going to create some form of a revolution in science. Why? Because materialism needs to die. Materialism needs to die so the new world can be born from it, wherein there's some, the reason why you can't do semantics is I'm not sure holographic principle, I'm not sure hologram is the right word. It's not a hologram, we live in a world, right? We all understand this. Yes, there is a material world, kind of, sort of, but according to the physics, it's more complicated than that. And yeah, hologram might not be the right word. It's not like we're beams of light, but we are light interacting with, it gets complicated. So I'll make videos. I'll try to process Johanan out to the best of my ability, explain in plain English. That's it. Game over. I really think that this is the way, the truth, and the light. This is going to be, if not quite an argument for theism, if you're an atheist, take a deep breath. Not quite proving the sky fairy with this argument, but a form of idealism is here to stay. It is coming. Get ready, get ready, get ready. Why? Because it's coming. There's no getting around this. Some of this stuff is right on the doorstep of established fact, like I said. Everything I told you about my couch and the color of my couch and the illusory nature of reality itself is basically true, established fact. And this is not going to be decided by atheist YouTubers and Christians in debates on modern day debate. It's going to be decided by the physicists, and it'll be decided relatively quickly within the next 10 to 15 years. Why? Because we're right on the doorstep of it. It is a revolution. It is an epistemic revolution first and foremost. It is not that easy to understand it epistemically. The physics check out. What Johanan is talking about in the physics check out. It's the epistemic. Try and imagine you were telling somebody back in the 1500s that the earth revolved around the sun. Really hard for them to lay a hold of that epistemically. They would not believe you. Why? Because it's so counterintuitive to how they actually experienced the earth at that time. The reason why it's really easy for us to know that the earth is the earth is in orbit around the sun is because we've had enough grounding epistemically. We've seen, solar system things when we were in second grade. They showed us the solar system. They showed us the sun at the center. So we got a sense of it buried into our brain so we can accurately interpret it. That hasn't happened yet to most people. So epistemically is going to be the challenge. Laying hold of this stuff. Like I said, holograph isn't the right word. Hologram isn't the right word. Illusion isn't the right word. That's why you can't argue semantics. Laying hold of this epistemically is going to be the challenge. But it is a revolution. And it is a revolution just as revolutionary as the Copernican revolution in terms of our understanding of how the world maps out. It's going to be just as profound. It's going to be just as profound. Johanan is right on the doorstep of proving it to you by the physics as established fact. James, I'm giving you homework. It's in the name of integrity, which you have some integrity. I'm charging you to rise to the standard of absolute integrity. Start doing some of the research. Check out Space-Time is Doomed, the holographic principle. Look up Leonard Susskind. He does a lecture on his version of the holographic principle. Very similar concept, very similar idea. And look up Space-Time is Doomed. And there are a couple others out there that you can cross-reference this with. It's right on the doorstep of mainstream physics established fact. Game over. That's how I see it. That's how I see it, kids, and pretty much think that's how it's going to be. So there you have it, kids. That is all for now. In the interest of ending my video 10 minutes early, I will stop yammering and close her up. The Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.